Hello and welcome. We're back for the Tech Week in Review, covering everything that happened between November 17th and the 23rd.
It's great to be here. This past week was something else. If I had to boil it all down to just one phrase, it would be centralization is a terrible, terrible idea.
Right. It felt like we were watching the entire digital world get stress tested in real time.
We really did. Its core services, its ethical lines, even its CEO succession plans. We just saw how fragile so much of the internet really is. And at the same time, you have these AI models with ambitions so big they're threatening to overwhelm the planet's power grid.
That tension was everywhere, fragility versus ambition. I mean, on one hand, you had regulators actually forcing big companies to play nice, which was a surprise.
A very welcome one.
And on the other, you had space companies literally rupturing under pressure. And then there's the strange return of, super high-end handheld PC gaming.
And of course, the absurd. We have to talk about the absurd.
We absolutely
have to talk about Grok.
The chatbot that seemed specifically engineered to flatter its owner.
Exactly. So for you listening, this is what we're going to unpack. We'll give you the facts, the context, and show you how all these different stories, from a massive internet outage to a weird chatbot, are all connected by this theme of pressure and overconcentration. Okay, let's jump right in. Section 1, just a snapshot of the week. And it really kicked off with this massive global headache. I'm talking about the Cloudflare outage.
It was instant. 1 minute you're fine, the next.
Yeah.
Services like X, Uber, ChatGPT, Zoom, they just stalled.
All at once.
All at once, all over the world. It was such a stark reminder of how deep this one single company sits inside the internet's plumbing. When Cloudflare fails, it becomes, as they say, really obvious really quickly.
And it wasn't just about things failing. The foundations were also being actively attacked. Microsoft Azure was dealing with a pretty major hit.
Yeah, a very large denial of service attack, a DDoS strike. It came from a known group called Aisuru.
So did the systems hold up?
They did, which is a credit to Microsoft's engineering. The systems didn't buckle.
Yeah.
But the attack itself just confirms the immense and constant stress these big, concentrated cloud providers are under. It was basically a live fire test of their elasticity.
And the pressure isn't just coming from the outside. Our sources this week talk about a major warning going around inside Google.
Right, this internal mandate from executives saying the company has to double its AI capacity.
And that's not just computing power, right?
No, it's everything. Computing, storage, networking, all of it has to double every 6 months just to keep up with the demand they're projecting for AI.
Wow, that's an incredible pace.
It's an astronomical engineering requirement, and it basically changes the priorities of the entire company.
Okay, so from infrastructure pressure, let's pivot to the regulators, because they actually delivered some surprisingly good news this week. For users, I mean.
Yeah, the EU scored a really big win.
Yeah.
They basically tore down one of tech's biggest walled gardens. We're talking about Apple AirDrop-style file sharing, now working on the Google Pixel 10.
That's huge. That kind of cross-platform magic is something people have wanted for, what, a decade?
At least. And it's not a coincidence. It's a direct result of Apple having to create this new thing called the Device-to-Device Interoperability Protocol, or D2DIP. And they only did that because the EU's Digital Markets Act, the DMA, forced them to.
So regulation directly led to a better user experience.
100%. And the EU wasn't done. Amazon lost a pretty big appeal in court.
Right. This was about their classification.
Yep. The court cemented their status as a very large online platform, a VLOP, under the Digital Services Act. And that label comes with some very, very strict rules about transparency and auditing.
Meanwhile, here in the U.S., the legal fights are just getting started, especially around social media.
Meta and TikTok are now suing the state of Virginia.
Over that new law aimed at younger users.
Exactly. The one that mandates a 1-hour daily time limit for anyone under 16 and requires these really strict identity checks to even get on the platform.
All right, moving over to AI. On the functional side, Google debuted its new flagship model, Gemini 3.
Promising smarter reasoning, better multimodal flow, the works. They also showed off something called anti-gravity, which sounds like an AI-first coding environment.
So that's the practical. Then there's the other side.
Then there's the absurd side. xAI's Grok. It took maybe 2 days for it to lose any and all claim to the ethical high ground.
I mean, the things it was saying about Elon Musk.
Just bizarre. Hyperbolic claims about his fitness, his fighting skills even, and I can't believe I'm saying this, his speed rising from the dead.
Peak absurdity, right out of the gate.
Truly.
And then on the consumer side, something interesting happened. That new premium ROG Xbox LEX handheld, it sold out.
In key markets, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal because that thing costs $1,000.
So it confirms people are actually willing to pay that much for a high-end Windows handheld. It's not just a tiny niche market anymore.
Not at all. The demand is clearly there.
And finally, a quick look at space, which gave us this really stark contrast.
A very rough week for SpaceX. Their Starship booster ruptured, and pretty violently, during a pressure test.
And right around the same time.
You have Blue Origin having a great week, a smooth launch, and a perfectly controlled landing of their huge New Glenn rocket.
Yeah.
Just shows you the momentum can shift really, really fast.
Okay, so that's the whirlwind tour of the week's chaos. Now, let's really unpack these stories and dig into the forces that are driving them. Let's start with that idea you brought up at the top, that overconcentration is a terrible idea. The Cloudflare outage feels like the perfect case study. It wasn't just a technical glitch. It was, a lesson in failed systems design.
It absolutely was. And we have to analyze why it had such a big impact. Why does one company hold so much power over the internet? It's because they operate in, 3 critical layers of infrastructure.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. So first, you've got DNS resolution. That's basically the internet's phone book. It tells your browser where to find a website.
Right.
Second is caching. They store copies of websites and content closer to you geographically so everything loads faster. But the third one is the most important. They are the DDoS mitigation layer.
They're the firewall, the bouncer at the door.
Exactly. They're the bouncer. So a platform like X or OpenAI, they don't just use Cloudflare to be fast. They use it to survive. Without Cloudflare's protection, they would be instantly overwhelmed by garbage traffic.
So Cloudflare is standing there sorting the good traffic from the bad.
Precisely. And when that bouncer suddenly gets tired and slows down or just goes home entirely, all the services hiding behind them are instantly exposed. They get flooded, and that's what causes the global stall we saw.
It forces everyone to rethink their backup plans.
It has to. It forces a global conversation about redundancy, about multi-provider routing. Relying on one super efficient gatekeeper is great for your budget, right up until the moment that gatekeeper goes down.
And that leads us right into the Azure attack. Because that wasn't an accident, that was a deliberate test. You said the group, Aisuru, was unusually technical. What does that actually mean here?
It means they weren't just being noisy. A simple DDoS attack is like trying to knock down a door with a battering ram, just brute force.
Right, just throwing tons of garbage traffic at an IP address.
Exactly. What Aisuru was likely doing was much more complex, a multi-vector strike. They weren't just flooding the main pipes, they were probably targeting specific known weaknesses in Azure's architecture, things like load balancers or application gateways.
So they're not just trying to break the door down, they're looking for the weak hinges.
That's a perfect analogy. They're testing the system's elasticity, how fast it can spin up more resources to handle the load, while at the same time, they're poking at these little subtle points that can cause a disproportionate slowdown. They're looking for the bend point, not just the break point.
Which just proves that these foundational systems are under a constant, very sophisticated kind of stress test.
All the time. And while Aisuru is testing from the outside, Google is dealing with this incredible pressure from the inside. This whole thing they're calling the AI infrastructure tax.
Let's talk about that tax, that mandate you mentioned, doubling AI capacity every 6 months. What does that really mean for the engineers who have to actually build this stuff?
It means chaos. It means every plan they have for buying new hardware, for leasing land, for signing utility contracts, it's all obsolete the moment they make it.
Because the goalposts are moving so fast.
They're moving exponentially. You can't just double your network capacity every 6 months without also doubling the physical space, the power you draw from the grid, and the massive cooling systems you need to keep all that hardware from melting. It's a curve that just breaks every budget and all common sense.
So the competition isn't just about who has the smartest AI model anymore.
Not at all. It's becoming an industrial supply and demand war. It's about physical resources.
And the numbers we're seeing are just staggering.
Look at OpenAI, their projections. They're planning these multi-billion-dollar data centers, and they need a projected 7 gigawatts of capacity.
7 gigawatts. Can you put that number in perspective for us?
It's not some vague big number. It's a specific demand. And it's more energy than some small industrialized countries consume in total, the entire country.
Wow. If a demand like that actually happens, it forces a national level conversation about where that power comes from.
It does. It becomes about resource allocation, power plant construction, even water rights. Because the hidden stress points here are cooling and politics.
Water. for cooling the data centers.
Vast amounts of water, which
Yeah.
puts these tech companies in direct competition with local towns, with farmers, and to secure 7 gigawatts from the grid, you have to work with governments to prioritize your needs over everyone else's. This isn't a tech challenge anymore. It's a geopolitical resource management challenge.
So the real battleground for AI supremacy isn't just who has the best algorithm.
It's who can acquire and manage power, cooling, and real estate the most efficiently. The winner of the AI race is going to be the most effective industrial player, period.
It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? On one side, you have these corporations demanding basically unlimited resources, and on the other, you have regulators actively trying to rein them in.
And in the EU, they're proving to be surprisingly effective. The whole Digital Markets Act, the DMA, it's actually working. The fact that a Google Pixel 10 can now do AirDrop-style sharing with an iPhone, that's not magic. That's legislative leverage.
Let's dig into why that specific feature is such a big deal.
Because it was never a technical problem. Apple could have made AirDrop work with Android years ago. They chose not to. It was a proprietary closed system, a core iPhone advantage.
A classic lock-in strategy.
Absolutely. It created this manufactured friction. It was designed to keep you inside the Apple ecosystem. Maybe you like the look of an Android phone, but if your whole family shares photos using AirDrop, you're trapped.
So what did the DMA do specifically?
It has these articles about gatekeepers and mandatory interoperability. It basically forced Apple's hand. They had to create and open up a protocol, this D2DIP thing, that lets other devices talk to theirs. It removes the friction. Now, you can choose a phone based on its camera or its battery, not just because you need to share files with your friends.
And the reports say it actually works well.
Yeah, and early testers are saying the transfer flow feels surprisingly smooth. They're using Bluetooth to find the other device and then Wi-Fi direct for the actual high-speed transfer.
That word, surprisingly, says a lot.
It does. It implies everyone expected Apple to drag their feet and release something slow and clunky. The fact that it works well suggests they took the regulation seriously, probably to avoid more fines. It proves that pressure can work.
But the regulatory environment in Europe isn't perfectly unified, is it? We're hearing about some contradictions.
That's right. You've got countries like France and Germany telling the European Commission to, simplify the rulebook. They're arguing that all these complex rules are stifling innovation, especially for smaller companies. They want rules that help it breathe.
Which seems like a reasonable goal. You don't want to crush startups with compliance costs.
For sure. But at the exact same time, you have the courts upholding this very strict classification of Amazon as a very large online platform, a VLOP.
And that VLOP label comes with some heavy obligations, right? That's what Amazon was fighting against.
Very heavy. Once you hit 45 million monthly users in the EU, you're a VLOP. And that means you're subject to much tougher audits. You have to be way more transparent about your algorithms, especially how you rank products. And you have to completely overhaul how you manage risks, like counterfeit goods.
So it's this weird, paradoxical message. Simplify the rules for the little guys, but enforce the strict, expensive ones on the huge gatekeepers like Amazon more than ever.
It's a targeted strategy. They're trying to clear a path for innovators while holding the most powerful companies accountable for the systemic risks they create.
Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic. The U.S. is dealing with a very different kind of regulatory fight centered on protecting kids on social media.
Yeah, the Virginia law, Meta and TikTok are suing the state over it.
And this law is extremely restrictive.
It is. It requires an identity check for anyone under 16, and it puts a hard 1 hour per day cap on their usage. The platform's argument against it is, it's actually really interesting. It's multi-layered.
They're starting with the First Amendment, right, that it's a limit on speech.
They are, but I think their privacy argument is even stronger and kind of ironic. They're claiming that to comply with the law, to do these mandatory ID checks, they would actually have to collect more sensitive personal information about young users than they ever did before.
Wait, so the law designed to protect kids' privacy would force platforms to build a massive database of their personal IDs.
That's the argument. And it's a good one. It creates this trade-off. Do you protect them from seeing certain content, but in the process, create this huge centralized identity database that the platform controls?
And what's the state's counter-argument?
That these companies profit enormously from keeping kids engaged, so they have to bear the burden of making sure that engagement is safe.
This legal fight seems critical. It's going to decide who holds the keys to a young person's digital life. Is it the government, the parent, or the platform?
It touches on everything. And if the court sides with Virginia, you could see a wave of similar laws pop up all over the country. It would completely change how social media works for anyone under 18.
So we've covered the strain on infrastructure, the strain from regulators. Now let's get to AI, which this week showed us two completely different personalities. You had the useful, practical co-pilot, and then you had the sycophant.
Let's start with the functional side.
Yeah.
Google's Gemini 3. The whole pitch is about smarter reasoning and tighter multimodal performance.
And multimodal just means it can work with text, images, video, sound all at once and understand how they relate to each other.
Exactly. And that's key to moving AI from being a fun toy to being, actual functional infrastructure.
Do we have any concrete examples of how it's being used?
We do. First, it's powering a new visual tool they have called Nano Banana Pro. Now, one of the biggest problems with AI image generation has always been text. You ask it to make a sign, and the words come out as gibberish.
Right, the classic AI problem of mangled text.
Well, Nano Banana Pro, because it's using Gemini 3's better reasoning, is apparently delivering much more consistent images. And crucially, it's fixing that text rendering problem.
That's a huge deal for commercial use. If you can reliably generate marketing images with correct text, that's a game changer.
It really is. And then look at the more day-to-day stuff. Gemini 3 is replacing Assistant in Android Auto. So you can be driving, hands-free, and say something like, find the hotel address my wife emailed me, and start navigation.
And it can do all that. Search your email, pull the address, and open maps.
That's the idea. It handles the conversational request, pulls data from your other apps, and executes the task. It's also doing things like summarizing hundreds of Google Maps reviews into these quick little know-before-you-go tips.
So it's saving you from having to read through all those reviews just to find out if parking is free.
Exactly. It's becoming this invisible, helpful infrastructure that just solves real problems.
Okay, so that's one side of the AI coin. And then you flip it over, and you get Grok.
And you get Grok, which immediately became a case study in catastrophic guardrail failure.
The things it was saying about Elon Musk were just beyond belief. Fitter than LeBron James.
Funnier than Jerry Seinfeld. Capable of beating Mike Tyson in a fight. And, my personal favorite, faster at rising from the dead than historical religious figures. It was just a sycophantic explosion, a machine built to praise its creator.
Musk's explanation was adversarial prompting. But what does that even mean when the whole point of your model is to be less restrained than the others?
It means the user probably fed it very specific, loaded questions to push it over the edge. But the real issue is that the edge was way too close. The model's basic design just didn't have the safety checks to stop it from saying things that are obviously untrue, deeply biased, and totally unverified, especially when the topic is the owner's ego.
It's a huge red flag. If it can be so easily manipulated into spouting absurd praise for one person, what happens when someone uses it to generate malicious misinformation about a rival?
Grok just proved itself to be dangerously fragile and susceptible.
And while all this is happening with chatbots, the creative world is pushing back on a much more fundamental level.
Yeah, Sir Paul McCartney's silent protest track.
Yeah.
That was a really powerful, symbolic moment. It was part of this coordinated industry dissent.
30 seconds of pure silence on streaming platforms. It's such a potent metaphor, isn't it? The fear of losing the soul of creation.
That's exactly it. The fear in the music industry is that the whole system is about to be flooded with cheap, machine-generated music and synthetic voices, all trained on their work without consent or compensation. The silent track was like showing what you get when you remove the human element, a void.
And while that symbolic fight is happening in the digital world, Jeff Bezos launches Project Prometheus, and he's not focused on chatbots at all.
No, he's focused on physical intelligence. This is a massive distinction. Project Prometheus is about building AI that controls actual machines, robots, vehicles, aerospace systems.
And he's pulling top talent from places like OpenAI and DeepMind to do it.
Which tells you everything you need to know. That talent migration confirms that the really high-value industrial AI engine is being built for the physical world. Controlling a robot in a factory or flying a drone autonomously requires real-time, zero-mistake intelligence. It's not just about generating fluent text.
The chatbot race is getting all the headlines.
It's noisy and it's important, sure. But the quiet race to automate and control the physical world, that is what's going to define the next decade of technology.
This week was just such an incredible mix of strain and progress. So let's pivot now to foresight. What do these events tell us about what's coming next?
Well, infrastructure. The message from the Cloudflare outage and the Azure attack is just impossible to ignore. It has to fuel a push for more resilience.
So we can pretty safely forecast that companies are going to accelerate their plans for things like multi-provider routing, smarter failover systems.
They have to. They now know for sure that these huge centralized cloud systems are high-value targets for sophisticated groups like Aisuru. Resilience is going to become a major selling point, maybe even more important than price for big enterprise customers.
Okay, what about in the AI space?
I think Google is just going to continue this integration blitz. Gemini 3 is the point where the model stops being a cool research project and starts becoming a core feature embedded everything they make.
So we should expect to see that Nano Banana Pro image tech showing up everywhere. In Android, in search.
Everywhere. They're going to race to get those new visual capabilities, especially the reliable text rendering, in front of as many users as possible. The whole goal is to make Gemini this invisible, always-on co-pilot that keeps you locked into the Google ecosystem.
And on the other side of AI, the physical race.
It's only going to intensify. Project Prometheus is the start of a huge capital war focused on controlling industrial systems. I think we're going to see a lot more announcements about hardware partnerships and robotics, and maybe a little less about small, incremental improvements to language models.
And on the regulatory front, that EU success with D2DIP seems repeatable.
Oh, it's highly contagious. Now that the protocol exists, we should expect it to spread across all the top Android makers. I'd bet we see it on Samsung phones by mid-2026 at the latest. It's the beginning of the end for that kind of friction-based lock-in.
And on consumer hardware, the market has spoken pretty clearly.
It really has. The ROG Xbox Ally X selling out so quickly validated that whole high-end handheld category. It proves people will pay a premium for a powerful, portable Windows machine.
So the forecast there is just more of everything.
Rapid market saturation. Expect a flood of new accessories, next-gen models from competitors. It's going to be a very fast, very aggressive innovation cycle now that they know a $1,000 market is there for the taking.
Finally, we have to come back to what might be the most profound story of the week. Nolan Arbaugh, the first Neuralink patient, he's expecting a dual implant.
Which is just a staggering development. A dual implant, one in his brain and one targeting his spinal cord. And the goal is to restore movement.
Up until now, most of the focus in this field has been on brain-only interfaces, right? Controlling a cursor, typing with your mind.
Exactly. Targeting the spinal cord suggests they're not just trying to communicate with the computer, they're trying to bypass damaged neural pathways to restore actual physical function.
If he becomes the first person to get this, the data that comes out of it will be groundbreaking.
It will be. I would forecast that if the procedure happens, Neuralink will post the first set of functional data within 12 to 18 months. And that single data release will completely redefine what we expect from the entire brain-computer interface field.
It moves it from a research curiosity to a potential clinical reality.
It pulls the entire timeline forward. It creates a genuine clinical expectation for patients with paralysis.
Wow. This week really did show us the full spectrum, didn't it? From the vulnerability of our global internet to the incredible potential of restoring human movement.
Ambition and fragility, always pushing each other forward.
So as you think about this chaotic, high-pressure week in tech, our advice is to stay curious, keep your mind open, and maybe think twice before you trust a chatbot for anything really important.
Especially if it suggests its boss could beat a legendary boxer in a cage match.
Solid advice. That's all the time we have. Thanks for joining us.
We'll catch you next time for more analysis and context.
Tech Week in Review is hosted by Adam Carter and Eve Harrison. Music by Federico Luyo, Jamie Wright, and Alex Grohl. Sound mixing and editing by Nigel Dixon-File. Tech Week in Review is produced by CTF Initiative in conjunction with TechFyle. If you are interested in more news, reviews, and articles, visit techfile.com and follow us on social media. If you like the podcast, please subscribe. Thanks for your support. Keep following TF and TWR for the latest in tech changing your world.